question that's going all over Twitter right now, and all the minds behind this bird website. Is Matthew Stafford a Hall of Famer?
I think he will be. I don't think you can sit there and say he's for sure a Hall of Famer right now. I mean, here's the thing. If he retired today, I still think he probably would be. I mean, the numbers stack up pretty favorably for him. He's always put up big numbers. He's actually going to be hindered at this point right now because he had Calvin Johnson for so long. So a lot of people are going to be like, well, he put up such big numbers when he had Calvin Johnson, blah, blah, you know what I mean? And fair enough. But let's see where he stacks up. I had this pulled up a second ago. What does he have? He's thrown for almost 50,000 yards in his career and 323 touchdowns, 161 picks. The interceptions are what's hurting him the most, in my opinion. And then obviously he led the league in picks this past year. And he's thrown 17 or more, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. So that's not great. One of them being his rookie year when he threw 20.
He was, I mean, if you take away a lot of stats out of it, I mean, obviously you can't because they're there. That was him. But like you take away those first 2 years and it was really rough. And he had Johnson his first 2 years too. And that team was really trying to come out of a massive rut that Rod Marinelli put them in.
Yeah, really bad teams. And he only played 9 games that first year, but only playing 9 games or played in 10 games and throwing 20 picks, that's not great. Threw interception 5% of the time. That's really not good. But yeah, that's what's hindering him. And then obviously, the things that he need, he's not a constant Pro Bowl guy. This has just been a crazy time where it's like, there's been so many really, really good quarterbacks at the same time where he's just kind of been overlooked to an extent. I think it's one of those things where I think when you put him up against, once he retires, when you put him up against everybody else from a numbers perspective, I think he's going to stack right up. And now having the Super Bowl ring, and finally being on a team where it's like, cool, like, yeah, he's obviously still the guy that's leading him to this, but he's on a team that can actually do it. I think that's going to make a difference for him. It's hard though, because it's like he was on such bad teams for so long. I mean, really, he was never really on an amazing team. He had some really big time weapons. Calvin Johnson, obviously, arguably, we've talked about before, arguably probably a top 3 receiver of all time. But other than that, I mean, people talk about it all the time. They're like, well, why didn't he do so? Why didn't he do better? Well, he had Calvin Johnson. I'm like, oh, wow, great. He had one person. That doesn't make his team better. So really, I mean, I think he is a Hall of Famer. I just think I wouldn't say he still needs to do more. I just think it's one of those situations where it's like he would cement himself and make it not really an argument if he won like another Super Bowl or even just had like 2 or 3 more just dominant seasons. I don't even think he needs to win another Super Bowl. I just think it's got to be where it's just like, cool, he's an upper echelon, especially when you have guys like Brady retiring. Breeze is gone now. Manning was around with him too, where he's been gone for a while. Like now he can kind of lead that upper echelon of older quarterbacks. Roethlisberger's gone. Like he can lead those. Who knows what's going to happen with Rodgers? He can lead like he's kind of part of that. He's just a little bit younger than those guys. He's going to kind of lead that next, not necessarily the next generation, but like be the end of that older generation. He can be the guy who's kind of looked to as like, hey, this guy's like the older guy who's still putting up numbers basically. And if he does that for 2 or 3 more years, I think he's good.
Yeah, and I mean, and you talked about some of the players and weapons that he does have, and he's had, just like he's had Johnson, he's had Cup, but there were years where he had Johnson and still nobody else besides Johnson, where Chris Durham was the number 2 wide receiver for Stafford. Like that sucks.
Just bad teams overall, like bad defense with him. Just bad.
There's a dream team scenario where you put in prime Stafford with prime Megatron and prime Barry Sanders together, and then you mix that 2014 defense that was second in the NFL that year with Terrell Austin, And then you also take this 2021 O-line, a healthy 2021 O-line. That team is a dynasty. That team is a dynasty. Then you have all the weapons. Then if Stafford still can't win something there, you have an argument. But there is never a time in Stafford's career where he had a good defense, a good O-line, and a competent run game.
Yeah,
all at the same time.
And his fourth quarter comebacks are insane. I mean, that's the other thing too, that people just got to remember how clutch the guy is. He had 8 fourth quarter comebacks in one season at one point. What year was it with Detroit? It was.
Which, by the way, we talk about untouchable records. I almost think that's.
Yeah.
I almost think that's untouchable.
Which is the crazy thing, because they went 9-7 that year, and he had 8 fourth quarter comebacks. So that means 8 of their 9 wins, he had to come back in the fourth.
They literally could have went 1-15 that
year. Could have gone 1-15 that year if he didn't do any of that.
And they squeezed a wild card, I'm pretty sure.
Right, exactly. He has had all but one season. He has at least led 1 fourth quarter comeback. He had 5 another year. He's had 3 a bunch of different years. I mean, that is his. To me, his legacy is clutch right now. And that's, yes, the numbers are there. He's put up big yardage. He's put up some big touchdown numbers. He's also put up some big interception numbers. We just talked about that. But I think if you're going to look back at him, you're going to think of toughness, in my opinion, because I think Detroit's always going to remember him for his toughness. And I think LA is starting to realize, like, this dude's a tough dude. And his fourth quarter comebacks. Because, like, anytime the Lions were in position to where they could go win the game in the fourth quarter, like
field goal or touchdown away.
Yeah. I felt like with Stafford, they had a really good chance. He always seemed to give him a good chance.
Didn't have that this year with Goff. I mean, he pulled off like one of them, but I mean, really, I never felt comfortable this year with it. Whereas Stafford, it was like, here we go, baby. I must always
one of those guys. Yeah, he's one of those guys where you felt good about it when it's like, cool, we got like 3 minutes left, but we're down 4 and we need a touchdown. Cool, he's gonna, or we're down 1 and we need a field goal. Like, you felt like he was gonna do it. There's only been like, I don't know, I can think of like 4 or 5 dudes that I've ever thought that way with. Brady, Rodgers, Stafford, maybe Breeze,
Brett Favre sometimes.
At times, but yeah, there's been a handful of guys where you ever felt like that consistently, and he's at the top of the list, I would say, right up there with Brady and Manning and Rodgers. I would say.
Yeah, and we talk about, like, obviously those weapons, but like, and he had some of them during the regular season and maybe kind of propel them at least to the playoffs. But there's guys going down left and right towards the end of the season that were kind of falling apart. A few guys going on IR, spending 3 weeks there. Thankfully, not a ton of terrible long-term injuries. But like this year, he's the only quarterback to throw 3 touchdown passes and win the Super Bowl without winning the MVP award. He had no run game. Like I said, they had 23 carries for 43 yards. That's less than 2 yards a carry. Their longest carry was 8 yards in that Super Bowl. So they didn't have a running back. They had no run game. Cooper Kupp was the only healthy wide receiver for the game after OBJ went down in the second quarter. And then they had a third string tight end playing. So I'm not sure how he didn't win the MVP, honestly. I think there's a case for Donald, obviously, too. The Rams pass rush kept him in.
Because Cooper Kupp was concussed and caught that last one. So you got to give him that for that one.
Yeah. But I mean, we also talk about Stafford's like skill set. I retweeted something a bit ago about a stat that Mina Kimes actually mentioned in her podcast, that Matt Stafford is the best quarterback in the NFL on plays directly following an interception. Nothing phases him. So they looked at stats from how quarterbacks performed directly after a pick from 2011 to now. And then obviously it shows the number of plays after an interception listed in parentheses. But Stafford is actually right up there with Alex Smith for the best EPA per pass on first play after an interception. And then the funny thing is the worst is Dak Prescott. But
the argument behind that is, well, he's throwing a lot more interceptions because he led the league in interceptions. So he has more opportunity as well. But I don't disagree because you're looking at it since 2011. So, I mean, I think and that goes back to the toughness factor. Like, the dude just goes out there and plays. I mean, that's always how he's been. I think he's underappreciated. I think Detroit finally realized what they had when he left. It's like, oh crap, because there were a lot of Detroit Lions fans even that were
And
just
it made more
blaming
haters
him.
when he left because people are like, he bailed on his team, blah, blah, blah. Like he actually, he didn't even, he would have stayed on the Lions if they really played hardball and said, no, I want you to stay here. He respectfully went to the front office and asked and requested a trade. And because the Lions organization has so much respect for the blood, sweat, and tears he's put in the organization for 12, 13 years, they're like, yeah, you know what? You're too good for us right now. We're in a position where it would be a disservice to you.
He would not, and I know I saw the retweet that you did where it's like they could bring him back in 2 years or whatever, but he would not, which is I don't think is gonna happen.
Well, I didn't retweet. I liked would be, and I didn't agree that would happen. I just thought it was really interesting, but
it would be interesting. But I think it's one of those things where it's like you don't realize what you had until you realize what else you could have, Not that I'm just gonna, bash on Jared Goff all the time because I thought he got better as the year went on.
I was gonna say, I look forward to seeing how he does
next year. Yeah, he's not Stafford, right? And people need to realize like they would bash him and blame losses on him. And I'm like, do you realize what this roster is? They are horrendous. And if he stuck around, which like you said, if they really didn't want to trade him, like he would stick around and he would play his heart out for Detroit. They would never be in position while he was still in his prime, more than likely to do anything, at least not to win a Super Bowl. You got to remember, this is what his 13th season. Like there's not that much time left. Quarterback, they aren't all playing like Tom Brady. They're not all playing until they're darn near 45.
You can't expect every quarterback to be Tom Brady. That's the thing with like Lions haters. They were like, Stafford wasn't that good. He was always an average quarterback. I was like, oh man, these are fighting words because I am a Stafford apologist to the T.
Yeah.
Like I really think he was the least of the Lions' problems for many of the years. And I just it's the consideration that he left this team high and dry and the quarterback touches the ball every play. That should be the reason you win a game or whatever. And I just I'm going to go back to the point of I wouldn't put Stafford in the Hall of Fame if he retired tomorrow, or at least it wouldn't be an easy decision. I think he's very borderline right now, but I think the way, like you kind of said, the trajectory of the Hall of Fame seems to almost be a participation award where they're giving it to players that might have a few Pro Bowls or whatever. And, were good for a year or two. Like you think of Michael Turner probably won't obviously be a Hall of Famer, but like, that's kind of the direction I feel like the Hall of Fame is getting. It doesn't feel like it's
not as elite of the elite of the elite anymore. And
yeah, it almost needs to be like a separate Hall of Fame.
Really like that. Yeah, exactly. I don't necessarily like that, but that's kind of where it's trending. And I don't know. I've always been of the opinion that like this is how I look at the Baseball Hall of Fame. Like if you were top 10 at your position, or if you were like one of the top 2 or 3 players at your position, in the league for like 10 years or more, like for like a decade or more, then you should be considered for the Hall of Fame, and you probably are a Hall of Famer, right? You can dominate a league at your position for a decade, then you should be considered. And like I said, Stafford's problem is, maybe if he had come at a different time, he might have been a dominant, he might have been the best quarterback in the league. It just became so quarterback centric right around when he got into the league. And you had the greatest of all time playing. You had Peyton Manning, you had Drew Brees. Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady. All of those guys have arguments for top 10 quarterback of all time.
Yeah.
Like that's insane. Right? How crazy that is. And then now you've got even some of the younger guys like Mahomes. I'm not putting Dak in this, but like he's good. He's going to put up numbers. There's no quarterback out there that's going to not put up numbers right now.
It's a passing
that was always
league.
His team. Yeah, it's a passing league. So I think really to cement himself for sure is like, hey, if you go out there and win another Super Bowl, like
I think if he even wins, at least one more playoff game, but two playoff games, I think he's. I think I'd put him in as long as, like you said, you also mentioned it at the very beginning of this segment, where if he puts up another 1 or 2, maybe 3, 4,000 plus passing yard seasons and 30 plus touchdown passes, he's already really high in the stats numbers. So he almost has the stats already to back it up people just like to use the marks of Stat Padford and stuff, but start winning with the roster that you have put together. And now I'm kind of concerned about the Rams roster, just with
they went all in this year.
Yeah, so they're going to lose pieces. Whitworth might retire. Donald now might retire. OBJ is a free agent with an ACL injury. It's pretty much Stafford and Kupp, and hopefully, Cam Akers becomes a serviceable, solid running back again. There's that. But I think they're going to take it. The Rams are a team that, we talked about the Bucs being a team that could be back and the Chiefs being a team that could be back in previous years. I don't look at the Rams this year and be like, I'll hope for one playoff win. That's kind of where your situation is right now. Kind of like the Bengals. Hope the Bengals make it to the playoffs, obviously, too. But again, it might be a year where you're expecting a step backwards.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a lot of their roster is getting older. Or a lot of it was like, hey, 1 year rental type guys. Some guys have decisions, and we talk about Aaron Donald. I mean, that's the anchor of their defense, best defense player in the league. If he's gone, that changes everything. It changed the outlook of that defense tremendously. So they got a lot of guys that you don't know how much either time they have left, or you don't know how much time they at least have left on their contracts currently. So it's kind of one of those things where they definitely went all in this year, realized the window is probably pretty small, and they needed to go all in this year to try to go get it. They did, which is not always the case when teams do that. I've seen it happen where teams go all in and they just, we've seen it all the time. Teams go all in for a season, and they get trounced in the first round of the playoffs, and it's like, well, that was dumb. Yeah. And then they mortgaged, the next 5 years, completely gambled away the next 5 years because they couldn't, they can't sustain it. They can't hold it together. So it'll be interesting. You'd love to get to a point, but they just aren't at the point with the age of the roster where they're going to be like a Chiefs team or even the Bills I look at right now. They could be a force for years to come. Just because the age of the roster isn't to that point.
They have a young elite quarterback. That's the other thing you want.
And the elite quarterback is, in Stafford, who knows how many years he's got left. They're not going to.
I've been making the hot take if he's got 2 years left, just with the back injuries and stuff.
The dude was beat up this year. He could. There was a game towards the end of the year where it was like, can he throw? It wasn't like Drew Brees level, but there was a few throws where I'm like, this isn't good. like this, because he had the shoulder thing and he had a bunch of problems. So he's always beat up. I don't think he's got a whole lot of time left.
I think he's going to have a shorter quarterback than shorter career than most of these upper echelon quarterbacks. That's for sure. Okay. I don't think he plays, 17 years like Rivers did. And I think Eli Manning went 15. I think best case, I think Stafford goes 15. He might do what Eli Manning did, but I don't know if he's got that long career in him.
Yeah. And for him, for his sake, you hope he wins. The problem is, like you said, I'm not sitting here just banking on the Rams being the next, just a back-to-back.
They're not a dynasty.
Last year it was like I wasn't banking on the Bucs, but I was like, they might have the best roster, and obviously that kind of imploded on them. Yeah. They did. That's kind of imploded on them with some injuries and some mental health problems. But they had at the beginning of the season the best roster in football. The Rams probably built the best roster in football, or close to it, at least a top three or four roster, and that got them to where they are. Mm-hmm. I don't think they're going to have that next year.
I don't think they had a top, I think their O-line is probably right in that 12 to 16 range if you bank it across the the entire NFL. I wouldn't give them a top 10 offensive line, I don't think, on the year. I think
receivers were top 3.
Yeah, they were good enough. That's basically what it was.
They didn't have any glaring weaknesses, and their defensive backfield got incredibly good, so they could complete clamp down. Their defense would put the clamps on you. Mm-hmm. Their linebacker level wasn't amazing, but it was decent, good enough. The defensive backfield was crazy, and then you got some elite quarterback play for clutch quarterback play, especially. Yeah, that can lead you to a Super Bowl. Especially, and you know what? Maybe they lucked out a little bit by the Bengals getting there. I don't know what I would have picked it as if it
was the Chiefs or something.
It was the Chiefs. I think the Chiefs probably were better. I think the Chiefs probably would have beaten them. I'll be honest.
I think even the Bills. Chiefs and Bills, and I don't know. The thing is with the Titans, you never know what Tannehill you're going to get. So if Tannehill comes out and has serviceable game, and Derrick Henry's
so bad.
yeah,
He was so bad in the playoffs.
yeah. It's just
Yeah.
uh,
So I still think yeah, if the Chiefs or the Bills, a high powered offense that was, really gets hot, that was probably a better matchup for the Rams. But
and then the Rams beating the Bucks. I mean, that beating Tom Brady twice in the same year is not an easy task for anyone to do. So
yep. Yeah, so much of the league now is just matchup dependent too, though, because the Bucks were probably the Bucks would, in my opinion, would have wiped the floor with the Bengals. But the Rams are such a tough matchup for them because they can match. I mean, just because they can match the receivers, and up front, the Bucks' problem was their offensive line was injured. Wirfs was hurt, and Jensen wasn't fully healthy, and they just had so many issues that they couldn't keep Brady upright. So that's why the Rams were able to beat them, and they still very easily could have lost that game. I mean, they, that came down.
Cam Akers almost gave it to them.
Exactly. So, so much of it, I think, is matchup dependent now. And yeah, the Rams lucked out a little bit, I think, getting the Bengals there. So I don't know. It'll be interesting. Next year, I wouldn't pick them right now at all.